All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming today to our live virtual series, Beyond the Clinic, Living Well with Melanoma. I'm Dr. Raymond Liu, medical oncologist and director of the Cancer Survivorship Program at Kaiser Permanente, San Francisco. For those of you that have been following our conversations each month, thank you for being part of our growing community. Also, if this is the first time you're joining, welcome. Each month, we have been adding to our understanding of topics that often don't get discussed in the clinic setting and are absolutely critical to the health and wellness of our community. Feel free to send in your questions and comments on the chat. Let us know what you're thinking and how you're feeling about today's topic, which is coping with grief during the holidays. It's an honor today to introduce our special guest, Dr. Deborah Seagull, licensed clinical psychologist and adjunct professor at the University of Pennsylvania. In her practice, Dr. Seagull works with cancer patients, families, and caregivers on many of the important issues we have discussed in this series. Thank you for being here today to speak with me, Dr. Seagull.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So our topic today is coping and grief during the holidays. And so I think we always start with just acknowledging the scope of that issue. So maybe get your sense of how big of an issue is this?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that people think about all the time, right? I mean, I'm already hearing in my practice. I know with my friends and family, like we're already starting to say, oh, the holidays are coming. We're preparing for the holidays. Just in sessions today, people are saying, oh, it's time to clean my house for the holidays. People are coming. Maybe, with COVID, we can actually have people coming over this year, and I think that people really feel the holidays as this time where we get together, we demarcate time. It's really just this special, special time of the year. And so many people feel like it's a time for coming together, for reflection, for family, for connection. I think it is such a big topic and such a big piece of people's lives. They look forward to it all year long, and it's how we, connect with others. So for so many people, I think it is such a big issue and such a big topic that is really on people's minds. And I think especially, when you have an illness or when you've lost someone, it's so hard to not have a strong feeling about the holidays one way or the other.
Well, in a way, it's not just even about holidays, right? It can be any triggering event. It could be, I know from a personal standpoint, for me, it was the birth of my daughter, which, is technically supposed to be a very happy, and it is a very happy thing. But because my mother passed away around the same time with cancer, I think about it every time. So the triggering event doesn't have to be a holidays, but it's like a major event.
Definitely. And I think that it can be absolutely around any major event. People have anniversary reactions. It could be around the holidays. It could be date of diagnosis. It could be, a wedding anniversary. It could be a birthday. It could be, anything. Sometimes people say, oh, my loved one, passed away on a Thursday. I hate Thursdays. Every time a Thursday comes around, it could really be as big or as small. I think any kind of trigger that gets linked with an emotional feeling, it ends up connecting to that event. So I think even something like a joyful occasion, like the birth of your daughter, if it's paired with something that was painful or meaningful, they're always kind of linked in that way. And I think that can be, just brings up more feelings around that event, than on an ordinary day for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think that people can hold both emotions at the same space? Like, can you be joyful around the holidays, but also be grieving at the same time? Like, they feel like very opposite emotions, and how do you hold those two things in the same space?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that happens all the time. I think there's so many different events in our lives and different occasions that happen to us all the time, where it's, I feel happy about this person and I feel not that happy about this person. They've got good qualities, they've got bad qualities, and I think that so many of life circumstances, come with pros and cons. And I think that, when you have an illness or when you've lost a loved one, you kind of feel a little bit weird about having two emotions at once, because you think you should feel sad or you think you should feel a certain way, but you might even find like during the holidays, like a little joy might be creeping in and you might feel a little bit guilty about that, and it's okay to be like, okay, like I do feel really sad and I do feel like this person, is still with me and that's making me feel really upset or feeling, like I want to move away from the holidays, but at the same time, there might be really meaningful moments and good things that are happening, and it's okay to let that joy in at the same time. And I think actually that's in some way like the secret to getting through the holidays and getting through a lot of different circumstances in life is like, if you feel the feelings and you feel the grief and you feel the loss, I think that sometimes like makes way for the joy to come in, and I think it's really actually really important to feel all the feelings. So I think it's definitely possible and realistic to think that it will be more than one feeling, both positive and negative. So I think that's definitely positive and actually really important for health to allow yourself to feel whatever feelings you are feeling. And in a day, feelings kind of are all over the place. They're up, they're down, they're sad, they're happy. Different moments dictate different sorts of feelings. So I think that that's actually a really healthy way to think about that. Just back to the example of your daughter and your mother. Of course you're feeling so happy and so proud and so loving, and then also feeling the grief that she's not there. So I think it's completely possible to feel more than one feeling at a certain time of the year.
Yeah, it was interesting because I think the meaningful part of it was also that I felt like my mom was holding on to see my daughter. And so there was a joy also about that experience too, that she got to see her first grandchild. And that's a powerful experience too. So it seems like what you're saying is it's okay to recognize there's many emotions and hold them in the same space. And even within the same day, go back and forth between some of them. And that's a normal human experience to do that.
Yeah. And I feel like sometimes that's the key. I think sometimes when we try and like push away bad feelings or even push away good feelings, or we try and control our feelings, that's really when we get ourselves into trouble. A lot of times I think people who feel depressed or stuck, it's not even that they feel so down necessarily. It's that all the feelings just kind of need to come out and be expressed, that sometimes even just like feeling that grief for a little while can then make way for the more positive feelings. And I think, you know, imagining like a holiday, and like what comes up around holiday time, like I think a day could have, it's a day is long, or the holiday season, has a lot of different moments in it, and some might be where you're crying about something and some might be where you're laughing about something. And I think that it's really in that balance. And if you try and restrict what you're feeling, or you try and restrict, your experience, or you feel like you should be doing something, or you should be, celebrating in a particular way, or you're forcing something, I think that's where you get into trouble. I think when you let what is ever in there just kind of flow through you, and get the support around that and have people to listen to and share in that, like, I think it's possible to have a really meaningful, even if it's a sad holiday, it could be a really meaningful holiday and really good in certain ways.
You just mentioned sharing with other people. So so you're saying that it's therapeutic to be able to share that with people you love and just share those feelings. And so that can help you work through it too.
Definitely. I mean, I think a big part of it, really all of these things apply to all the time. It's just really heightened around the holidays, but having, surrounding yourself with people that love you and that you love, reminding yourself that there are good things in your life, reminding yourself that you can ask for help and you can get support, even if the holidays like look a little bit different than they did before. Absolutely sharing with other people, not feeling like, I think people really do want to hear and connect, about, sad things that are happening, and people do want to be there for other people. So talking to other family members, talking to friends, believing that other people really want to hear your story and really want to include you maybe in their holiday or have the holidays look a little bit different. I think reaching out to other people and not isolating feels very important, and not saying, oh, like nobody wants to be burdened with my grief and nobody wants to, hear what the way that I'm miserable, and nobody's going to want to be around me this year, but to really trust that people do want to be there with you, and that reaching out to others and talking to them can be such a big benefit in terms of not feeling alone with those feelings. And that is so important, again, for not getting stuck in that depression and isolation that we really, really want to avoid around the holidays and at other times.
I think we come down to that a lot, just like talking to other people, talking to your community, engaging the community. What do we do with introverts? Because I'm an introvert, and I'll give you an example of Thanksgiving a couple of years ago. I'm originally from the East Coast. I've transplanted to California, and I don't have family out here. And during COVID, I'm not flying, and so we had a neighbor that invited us over to Thanksgiving, and I thought in my mind, okay, that's that's not really my Thanksgiving tradition, but what do we do with introverts who don't necessarily want to go out and like don't want to share? How do they get through this?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I've definitely got a couple introverts in my house as well. Just happen to be one of them. um, but I think with introverts, I mean, I think also, you know, I think in a way you don't want to avoid the holidays and you don't want to force the holidays, so it's like finding the balance of like, there's no shoulds here. The shoulds are, we don't want to have anybody who's feeling like they're doing something that is isolating, that is, kind of fostering the grief, is getting them sort of stuck in this hole, but for introverts or for people that don't feel like going to the neighbor's house or don't feel like engaging in the joy in the ways that it was in the years past, I think it is all about like really being in touch with yourself and saying, okay, what am I actually feeling? What's good for me? What would be healthy for me? Like, okay, so maybe an introverted person doesn't want to attend, a Thanksgiving or a holiday dinner with, 10 other people or 20 other people, but maybe like taking a hike with a few friends or, maybe doing something even alone, but that is meaningful. And I think that there has to be the balance between being introverted and kind of doing something isolating and withdrawn that wouldn't end up being good for you. And I think it's like really important to distinguish, between those things. So like for an introvert, thinking about like, well, what would actually feel good and healthy for me today? Like how do I want to make this day not just like a day for sitting in front of the TV in a bad way, or maybe I can like find some meaningful things to watch on TV and it would make me actually feel good and connected and like I'm doing something special. Maybe I'll watch like, something that connects me to the person that's no longer here or, and I think that's the distinction between introversion and withdrawal in an unhealthy way and trying to like parse out for yourself, like, what would that mean? So, right, someone's not going to want to go to a big party, but maybe there is a way to like do something meaningful for yourself and not just isolate.
You mentioned something really interesting. You said hiking, which is sort of like, if you're an introvert, that's also physical activity, right? So there are also things you can do that, because physical activity also improves mental health as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also being in nature and being around beautiful things, I think also connecting. Like, I think sometimes when people are so sad and so deep in their grieving process, it just feels like the whole world is like dark and miserable and alone. And I think something that I have found so beneficial with patients is really seeing that you can couple like the deepest tragedies and deepest sadnesses with beauty, and I think beauty is something that ends up being really, really healing, just juxtaposing some beauty next to sadness and next to like extreme pain. So I think something like nature or remembering that there is still beauty in the world, whether that, that means different things for different people. Like for me, that might mean seeing beautiful flowers or going out into nature. Other people might need to see art or, watching children play together, or, there is still beauty in the world, even if it feels like you're in this dark hole of grief. And I think sometimes that's just so hard to remember and to kind of put yourself in a position where you can like start to remember, even if things don't exactly feel beautiful, you can start to remember that there's more out there in the world than just the pain that you're feeling.
Yeah, I think what you just said resonated with a lot of folks in the audience. Thank you, Harvey, for saying, we're turning something negative into trying to create agency and turning something positive, like being in nature, which has a lot of things that are positive about it, and that can be helpful no matter if you're introvert or extrovert. So that's really fantastic. One of the things that always comes up during the holidays too, especially because a lot of us are transplants. We our family is in a different place or than we are right now. With the pandemic, it's harder to travel. Is video the same? How do we create a sense of connection with people we love when they're so far away, and especially during the holidays?
That is such a good question. I feel like the jury's a little bit out on that one. We're all kind of coming together, but I will say, from my experience and, patients' experience over the past couple of years, like, okay, is it the same? I'm going to say, of course, not the same, but I do feel like it's really powerful. And I feel like people are also finding really creative ways to come together, and like use Zoom in creative ways to, have different kinds of discussions, have different kind of meetings. I know for us in my house, we celebrate Hanukkah and we usually do like a huge Hanukkah party. And last year, we've got lots of cousins and lots of people, and we did like a gift opening, on Zoom, and that was really, really fun. I think that there's creative ways to use Zoom, but I think also like reaching out to your community, like the people that are close to you. And I guess we don't know exactly how the holidays are going to look this year in terms of COVID, but I think that there is ways to be creative with neighbors and people in your neighborhood and having outside events. And, we had an outside Thanksgiving last year, and I guess it's a little colder here than it is there in California. But I think that there's ways to connect with your family by Zoom and have those meaningful moments. And I think there's ways in your own community to connect. I think people are trying so hard to make COVID friendly, events so that you can feel some kind of normalcy, and go out there and participate in things, even if it's not the traditional family celebration. But I think, families who are close kind of like make that work, whether it's hosting something outside or talking by phone or talking by video, whatever it is, I think that it's possible. But of course, there is a huge loss with COVID. I mean, it's been such a tough couple of years where we haven't really been able to connect in a certain way. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, like there's grief and there's joy in that, right? Like there's so much grief when we haven't been able to see our families if we're transplants or we live far from our families. But I think there's also something incredibly beautiful about the ways families have sort of connected to one another. And, you see different videos of grandparents and grandchildren or, different things that happen. Like people have made such efforts, to connect to one another creatively. And I think if you can kind of balance again, like the joy of that and like how much people are willing to sit on Zoom in a day and, connect and do what they have to do with the loss of like, of course, this would be better if we could fly across the country and be with our people, but, the love is still there and trying to like hold on to, the love being there and the happiness being there, even in the midst of this terrible thing that's going on around us.
Right. Well, how do we, what are some other ways we can build new routines? Because I think some things you're saying is like, okay, there's a lot of grief. Maybe there's something positive we can do. We can go out in nature. We could, connect and share, and we can even do that in the pandemic. But it feels like there has to be this adaptive moment, right? Because maybe we were used to doing a tradition with the one we love, and there's been a loss there, and like you don't want to give up the old routine, but you have to build a new one. How do you get through that transition phase? How do you do that?
And I think again, like there's like a real balance of all the things, right? And I think a lot of this, which it's really hard to be intentional when you're in the middle of grieving, but I think that so much of it is about being intentional, saying, okay, the holidays are coming, this event is coming, different things are coming, it doesn't have to just be the holidays, and saying, okay, this is not going to be the same as it was. And I'm going to try and, do something maybe to remember my loved one. Different people do different things. They could light a candle, can have different pictures. Some people like to plant a tree. Some people like to do things with their children, to commemorate a loved one. And, people form all kinds of rituals, around the loved one. And, if it feels tolerable to really honor the loved one on that day, which would be, of course, a change from the past. But then to also say, all right, well, maybe the first year after, I'm going to do something totally different. I'm going to fly to the Bahamas. Well, maybe not with COVID, but I'm going to do something completely different because I just can't bear to do the same thing. Like I had a patient once who was just like, there is no way I'm putting up a Christmas tree this year, even though he had little children and he had just lost his wife. And he was just like, I just can't do it. So that year they didn't do a Christmas tree, and they did some, other rituals, and they did presents, and they went to a different house, a family member's house, and they just kind of mixed it up. But then I feel like, in the years after that, you start to bring back the traditions that you want. You start to say, okay, maybe we're going to have to change it up and we're going to have to do something different. And I'm going to have to incorporate some new things. And that's painful, but we'll do something different. And then we'll think about the things from the past that we really want to keep. So if there are things, your family would eat every holiday or every year. Like maybe I really want to retain that year and maybe I can tolerate the pain of that. And that just feels like a really good memory, so I'm going to incorporate some of the good and some of the past and the present, and try and incorporate a mixture so that it can feel bearable, because you don't really want to throw all of those memories away. You don't want to throw out all those traditions. Like those are traditions that were built on something, and those are traditions that meant something to you and your family. And to try and know that, hanging up ornaments or, having certain foods or doing certain things or having certain family members over, like it can be painful. But if you incorporate maybe honoring your loved one and you incorporate new traditions in there, maybe you go somewhere else for part of the day and then incorporate the dinner at night that you used to have, like being really flexible, that it does not have to be the way that it used to. And I think that's part of the grieving, is that it's not going to be exactly the same as it used to, that it's going to have to be something different. But again, it can be something really nice, even if there's that sadness there. And I think the key is to sort of incorporate both and to hold on to that person at the same time as you can move forward. And I think in a way, that's the task of grief, is you want to always hold on to that person in your heart, and you always want to like keep them there and have the good memories. The problem is when you get stuck there and it's like, you're just doing exactly the same thing and not able to move forward. And so you kind of have to really not do things exactly the same way, because you also want to make sure your own life is going forward and that you're able to create new traditions and new memories and new joys with the people that are still here, and to really make that a priority too. So I think that's the task of grieving in general, is to hold on to the person and be able to not get stuck in the past with that person, but to move forward and to create something new and honoring that person too.
Yeah, and I think that's great, because I think what I'm hearing from you too is it's easier to do that transition if you hold on to something that's old, but not the whole thing that's old. So like things that you really value from a tradition standpoint, and then try to build something new onto that, and that makes that transition a little bit easier, because you have a little bit of the old here also, so you don't have to just completely redo it and do something totally new.
Yeah, and again though, like that first year, or there might, and again, like everyone's grief timeline is really, really different. And I really actually want to say that, because I feel like people come in and they're like, oh, it's year one, I should be feeling this way, or oh, it's year two, I should be feeling that way. And so I just want to say, like, everyone's grieving timeline is really, really different and really personal, and that's okay. But for a lot of people, like the year after, they just can't bear to do Christmas in the same way, or Hanukkah in the same way, or New Year's in the same way. Like it just feels too close. It feels impossible. And for people that can, that's wonderful. But for a lot of people, that first year might just be like, we're just gonna change it all up. But I think when you start to have a little bit of distance from the grief, I think that's the point, is incorporating. You don't want to throw out all of the old, because there was so much loveliness probably in the old, and you want to like keep that and then also move forward.
So what do we do when, like, are there other resources we can, I know, because this time is so short, we only have half an hour. There's so many things we can talk about, and we've talked about some of the concrete steps, but what are some of the things that you think are, that other resources people could use to help understand and navigate through this process?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of like help online. First of all, I think that, there's a lot of resources in terms of people write blogs, seeing that you're not alone. I think there's different, organizations that talk about like coping during the holidays. There might also be some chat groups, so then you can have some interaction there. Two books that I have found helpful. I think that I can put them in the chat.
Yeah, I think we're going to put them in the chat, and we'll have them on the website too. Yeah, but go ahead. Yeah, tell us
but there's these two books, one by James Miller, and it's called How Will I Get Through the Holidays? And then another one is Dr. Clarence Tucker and Cliff Davis, and that's a self-help manual on grief through the holidays. And I think that something like a manual, because a lot of the stuff when you're reading online can be like, okay, I know. But if you don't want to go into your own personal therapy, or you don't feel like you need that, like something like a manual can be really helpful, because a lot of it is, really reflecting on your own experience. I'm just looking at the chat. I just think that, I just think that lost my train of thought there for a second. I think that if there's a manual, and you're really sort of delving into your own experiences, that's where you can get some of the answers, because I don't think it's a one size sort of fits all sort of equation. So if you can do something like a manual where you can fill out answers to questions and see what you want, you'll probably be able to find out the answers. Like other people's answers are not going to be your answers.
Well, thank you for giving those resources. I wanted to address some things that are said in the chat, some really, really meaningful, impactful statements. Tracy, just, talking about losing her husband on Valentine's Day from melanoma and feeling alone. And it's just, it just sometimes feels overwhelming. And I want to sort of acknowledge that sometimes loss just feels that way. Lori, thank you so much for your comment, saying that you lost a loved one, in this case, your dad, in October of last year. And the holidays just felt like the emotion there was shock and numbness. And this year feeling even way harder. And I think, Deborah, that goes to your fact that maybe the grief is not even that year. It's like a year later or 2 years later, or it just keeps going. How do you know when it's like whether you need to be on the books, you need to go talk to someone about it and get help? How do you know, when does that?
Yeah, and I just want to appreciate, that people are feeling comfortable enough to write that in the chat. And it is so challenging. And just to remember, grief is really love, and there's not a time limit on that, and if it's 1 year or 2 years or more, it's, I think that the grief can go on for a long period of time. These are people that you really loved and held so close to your heart. So just to be compassionate with yourself around, the amount of time that it takes. I think when that it's time to maybe seek additional help, whether in the form of a support group or therapy, is if there isn't that balance that I was talking about. If it feels like it's only that grief, I didn't see the comment, but if it's like year 2 and it's only the grief and it's not like a mixture of feelings, if it's not like grief, but there are really wonderful moments with friends or other family, or get joy out of work, or get happiness in other parts of your life, even if you're heartbroken. I think if you don't have that balance, I would say that's a red flag to get a little bit more help, with processing through that grief. And just if you feel like it's just hard, there's no reason not to see a therapist too. It can just be very, very beneficial to not feel alone with your grief. But certainly if you're not feeling that balance, and if you're just feeling the heartbreak and you're not feeling any joy, like not feeling happiness or joy is 100% like a red flag in terms of really needing some help, because that's when your grief is starting to walk its way into depression, and you really want to get help with that.
Christina, thank you so much too for your comment about your sister last December, and I think, Deborah, what you're saying too is so heartfelt here, because the community here they're outpouring their grief here, and it's like it is a lot. It's so much, but we're all here to support each other, and we're all here to be here for each other, and that's important. Whether it's in this environment or in our communities or with our friends and family.
Yeah, absolutely. And that support is so important. And I would just highlight the importance in grief of groups also. Just being with people that are in a similar experience can really, really help not feel alone. I would definitely highlight the importance of groups in terms of grieving as well.
Right. What do you do? We have another listener here. Gail, thank you so much for your comment. What do we do when it's a loved one? It's not us that, we have grief, but we see someone else who's in our family that's grieving even more than we are, and on the surface, and and you're trying to help them too. And so you're dealing with your own grief as well as, trying to help someone else through it that you love. That's also hard. Yeah.
That is also so difficult. And to just know that, your support, all your care, whatever it is, making food, being there for that person, helping that person not feel alone, but also knowing they're on their own trajectory. Like you can't force it to move faster. You can't force it to change. All you can do is encourage that person to get help if it feels like they're kind of slipping into that depression, and to be there with them. But it's so hard because you can't make somebody move faster than they're able to move. They're kind of in their own process too. It's very difficult all around.
Well, you're saying so many amazing nuggets because you mentioned food too, and I'm thinking like, food is love too, right? Food is a basic thing we provide to each other, and we share a meal, and so there are definitely ways to support each other, whether it's just eating ice cream together. I don't know what it is.
Totally, exactly. Having even a tiny bit of fun together,
Yeah, that's good. And I can't believe 30 minutes has passed. We're getting to that point.
So quickly.
I want to thank you, Dr. Seagull, for your time with me today. And time is our most precious resource. So again, thank you for listeners,
for having me.
It's for
really meaningful conversation. I really appreciate it too.
Yeah. So with the last few moments of time, I want to thank everyone who has come each month to the Beyond the Clinic series. We've learned so much about so many different topics. We've talked about anxiety, building relationships, self-image, talking to our kids. I mean, so many things. And now we've come full circle again in the end of the year to talk about the holidays. So I'm very excited to announce that beginning in January, we'll be transitioning to launch the Beyond the Clinic monthly podcast. So in each episode, we'll be speaking to different experts and key voices across the melanoma support community, just like we're doing now. But we'll be learning together through these key voices through a new, more convenient format, which is the podcast. So we'll be introducing a whole new set of topics, including how to get good information in the internet era, how to achieve the best care and quality of life, reducing stress and anxiety, treatments of the future, and life beyond treatment. So you can find out more and be the first to listen by visiting aimatmelanoma.org. So thank you so much, Dr. Seagull. Thank you. And looking forward to starting a new journey with everyone soon.